Hi everyone, welcome to Sunny Day Discussions. I am Sunny Day. First, I'm going to go over the mass shootings. On the 4th and the 5th alone, there were 15. 9, I believe, were on the 5th. So that's pretty bad. One of the mass shootings was in Baltimore, Maryland. It was one of the worst. There was 28 injured. Well, recently a 17-year-old has been charged in connection with that mass shooting. They were charged with possession of a firearm by a minor, assault weapons possession, reckless endangerment, and handgun in a vehicle. 17. That's an issue. Other than that, there's a whole lot I want to discuss. Tensions are boiling over in this country. People are angry, people are scared. And I think a lot of it has to do with economics, economic uncertainty. When you are working your butt off and you can't afford to do anything outside of pay your basic bills, that causes stress. You don't get any downtime. You don't get any time to just relax because you're working just to pay your bills. Plus, there's also medical uncertainty. You don't always have access to medical care. It's expensive. Even with Obamacare in the marketplace, there is a whole swath of people that fall in between. So they make too much income to qualify for state assistance or government assistance, but not enough to be able to afford their own insurance. And a lot of employers don't offer insurance to employees. And if they do, they try to keep their hours down below the 40-hour a week so they don't have to pay it. So that's another huge issue. There's a lot of toxins around, cancers. And if you can't afford insurance, if one of those things unfortunately happens to you, you're kind of screwed. Then there's the climate change. There's fires and hurricanes. Insurance companies are no longer covering certain areas for homeowners because of the high risk. And there's a lot of pundits and news programs that are not associating the increase of hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, earthquakes with climate change. But it's a fact. That's what's happening. Because we're heating, there's more extreme weather conditions, such as the droughts, the more hurricanes in the hurricane areas like Florida. That's an issue because people lose everything when those climate disasters happen. And if they can't insure their homes because they live in one of those areas, then they lose everything. People are scared, and Republicans stoking this fear does not help. There's low wages, and the cost of housing is high. And Republicans claim that the unhoused are just druggies and mentally unstable, but 50% of all unhoused people actually have jobs. They just cannot afford a place to live. So that's another thing that's causing a lot of tension. The stoking of tensions by Republicans, such as the fear about the LGBTQ plus community, particularly the trans community and drag queens. By making their base so scared that these people, these communities, are targeting children, that's going to push them over the edge, and more violence is going to happen in direction towards those communities. So that incitement of fear does not help. The lies that are being told about people, like the January 6th rioter who was just caught outside of Obama's home with an arsenal, that was brought on stoked by fear. And that's all Republicans have up their sleeves, is fear. Now, I also want to touch on the military recruitment problem. And there's a lot of talk about why it's happening, what we can do to fix it. Well, there's a really simple solution. The American people see how America treats its veterans. And it's not good. It's not well. Many are on the streets. Many are not getting the attention and health care that they need, whether it's mental health care, physical health care. They're not getting it. And the transition from a war zone back into society is not always easy. And so we've kind of abandoned them. We send them to war to fight for our country, and then our thanks is to be like, sorry. And then the fact that we have such a high budget for our military, yet we can't afford to pay the soldiers well. Most soldiers can't afford to live on just their income alone. That's a problem. You know, if you're not being taken care of, no one's going to want to go put their life on the line for that. Now, the incentive would be to increase soldiers' wages, make it beneficial, and then guarantee that they will be taken care of after they retire from the military. It's a really simple solution, but apparently that people don't want that to happen. Government doesn't want that to happen because they want more money for either their generals, weaponry, what have you. Sorry, I'm trying to get all my thoughts in order. There's also stoking the fear by Republicans of transgender children and saying that there's genital mutilations happening. And that is just flat out false. No prepubescent has any sort of gender affirming surgery. Doesn't happen. Now, post-pubescent, very small number of top surgeries. No bottom surgery. There, in the last year, was 200 trans kids who got top surgery. But to counteract that, there was 3,000 teenagers who got breast enhancement surgery, cosmetic top surgery. Yet I don't hear conservatives screaming about that. It's only for the trans community that it's bad. And the lies that they're propagating, which is causing their base to hate and be fearful of, it's extreme. There is no genital mutilation. The way it works is if you have a child who is transgender or questioning, you socially transition first. Meaning, if you have a little boy who feels like they're a girl, they start dressing like a girl. They grow their hair out if that's what they want. They get more interested in the gendered activities that are appropriate for females. And then as it progresses and they get to the puberty stage, they talk with their doctors about possible puberty blockers. So you don't have a transgender boy all of a sudden developing breasts and getting their period. Now, puberty blockers and hormone replacement therapy are all reversible. As soon as you stop taking that hormone or that puberty blocker, you will start to go through the puberty that you had stopped. So if that child is unsure but wants to try it, it's completely reversible. If they down the road decide that, hey, maybe that's not it, maybe I'm non-binary or whatever, it's reversible. So all of these lies are just stoking the fear, and we're just a tinderbox ready to combust at any moment. I also wanted to go over how in America, we fear mass shootings and protests that possibly turn violent, especially on the right. There is some violence on the left too, but it's overwhelmingly on the right. But in England, they protested with confetti and puzzle pieces. Now imagine that. Wouldn't that be wonderful that you could protest with something beautiful? So it's just, the contrast was amusing to me, so I wanted to bring that up. Then also, I wanted to touch on the cleverness of the Wisconsin governor. Now, he resides over one of the most gerrymandered states. So he has a Republican majorities in the House and Senate, the state House and Senate. And they put forth a bill that would increase funding for public education. Now, because of a rule that Republicans in the House put into play, it was called a line item veto, where the governor could change letters in a word to make that word a different word. That was called the Vanna White veto. Then there was also where you could change words in a sentence, and that's called the Frankenstein veto. Those have since been repealed, which I think is probably a good thing. But there was nothing in that says that you couldn't veto anything to do with numbers and symbols. So the bill was to increase public education funding by $325 per student for the year 2024-25. So the governor used his veto powers, and he vetoed the 20 before the 2024, or before the 24, and the dash, making it 24-25. So for the next 400 years, this increase in public funding, public education funding, is guaranteed. Now, I'm not saying that that will stay. I'm sure there will be lawsuits challenging it, all of that kind of stuff. But I thought that was a pretty clever use of the veto power. Now, I also want to touch on the fact that today's politicians, the majority of them, Democrat and Republican, are so out of touch with the American people. They don't understand the living paycheck to paycheck. They don't understand not having time to raise your children because you have to work so you can feed them. Now, I know it's completely unfeasible, but I like to imagine that we could instill, like how Germany has a year of service after you graduate from high school. If you want to run for office and you have not lived below the poverty line ever in your life, particularly as an adult, that you would require, or that the United States would require, that potential politician to survive on a minimum wage for 1 year before they're qualified to run for office. Then they would have a taste of what the average person goes through. You know, have the government find the housing that they can afford with a minimum wage job and provide that, but they still would have to pay their rent and go to work and pay utilities and food. And I'm not even saying for a whole family, just for that person, that individual themselves. That would be fantastic, because then we'd have politicians that are more in touch with the general population and what we're going through. But we don't, because in this country you have to pretty much be wealthy or go into severe debt to run for office. And most of the people that are wealthy either don't remember what it's like to live poor or have never lived poor because they've been born into families with wealth. So I know it's a fantasy, a improbable scenario, but it's fun to imagine how different this world would be if that was the case. Now, I also wanted to touch on a question that has been asked about if you could change one thing in this world or eliminate one thing in this world, what would it be? And I kind of went through the whole usual scenarios, the ending hunger, famine, world peace, all of that. And then I realized that there is one thing that all of that stems from, and that's greed. Think about it. The homeless can't afford a place to live because of the greed of landlords and the greed of the government for not providing enough assistance. The trickle-down economic theory could work if it wasn't for greed. Almost everything that we can point to that's wrong or broken in this country can be traced back to greed. So that would be my answer. If we could eliminate greed, we could eliminate a ton of the world's problems. And I know that's impossible, but again, it's a nice fantasy. So that's everything for the video today. I hope you liked it. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.